Hello everyone, I thought we'd do a voiceover this time and see how this works. So here I have the side cover off on the town. We're going to pull this harmonic balancer. I've already got the power steering belt and AC belt off. I haven't gotten the alternator belt. So this motor mount we have to take off has got 4 17mm heads. But first we're going to take this radiator out, and I've already drained the coolant on this. And then, whoop, looks like I'm just going to put you on the stand here. So we'll get to this. So here this is a aftermarket balancer, so I'm using now just a puller from like Advanced Auto. Just pulling this puller out. I've used a piece of rod from another factory harmonic balancer puller for this engine. I'll show that here in a moment. Just slowly pulling this off. I will eventually have to lower this. I've realized that the top of the balancer is not going to clear the frame rail. Give it a... So here I've dropped it down so it will clear and come off without any hesitation. I did have to take the cross support down. I just undid the 2 front bolts and the 2 rear bolts just to give it enough so the engine will come down. So here I got it off. Here, the reason why I'm doing this is that I wanted to check timing again, because I've had a running issue come up again like before, and it's very similar. And I got paranoid, and I didn't want I want to check to see. Oh, there's the rod I was talking about. It's balled in a half sphere on each end. And of course, it helped take the tool off to show it this better. But I want to make sure that the key did not shear on this crankshaft timing sprocket. So I just drilled a small hole in the end of this, a shallow hole for this rod to fit in. So here I'm checking to see if the key sheared again or not. And you can see where the screwdriver is. That's where the key is. And I had stuffed another stock piece of key that I cut down and fit to size to keep the key in to the groove that's in the crankshaft there. So it looks like this didn't happen. So now, since I have the balancer off, I'm just going to take this piece of sheet steel, and we're going to modify the timing cover so that we can see the timing mark, so we can just only have to pull the harmonic balancer off and to check timing instead of having to pull the entire timing cover. So this area here is where we're going to put a notch or a hole, and so we can see the marks. I'm just going to use a drill bit here. I'm just going to start a hole, and then the sheet of metal will prevent this drill bit from catching the timing belt and ruining it or anything else that's behind it. So we're only putting a hole in the timing cover and nothing else. So just going to put a hole here, and then eventually I'm going to use the drill bit to cut the plastic just by pulling down. So now I've got a slot, and we're going to get ready to put this balancer back on. going to use a little bit of this aluminumized anti-seize. This helps install the balancer and prevents it from holding up. I found this to be a good trick. Just put a little bit on, you don't need a lot. So this balancer has marks on it in degrees for timing. So 360 it's TDC, and then it starts over from there. It goes 10, 20, 30. So here I'm trying to show the TDC mark, but this camera doesn't focus very well. So there's a mark. I'm going to line this 360 degree mark up with the timing marks, and then there's a mark on the timing cover I'm checking and see if it's all lined up. I'm going to use this piece of all thread with a nut and a washer to push this harmonic balancer on. Don't ever use the retaining bolt as a tool to push or pull the harmonic balancer. You will destroy the threads. It can be done, it's just I'd rather not take the chance. So here I'm going to line up the balancer, and then I'm going to stick this piece of all thread in. The all thread here is the same thread pitch and diameter as the crank bolt. It's a 12 millimeter 1.75 thread pitch, and I think I got it about a foot long. Here, this is where I'm trying to get it all lined up. And then we're just going to stick the saw thread in here. It would help to have the balancer somewhat square. So I decided to use a different washer. The other two were a little bit too narrow for what I wanted to do, so we're just going to use this wider one. So I'm going to stick this on here. We're just going to square it up and start threading it in by hand. When you put these balancers on, don't ever use power tools. Always do it by hand. That's the way I was taught. That way you can always feel if it's getting real hard, stop what you're doing and look, because you can screw something like this up really easily. So we're going to screw this nut all the way down. I just realized it's going to become recessed and become hard to put anything on it, so I'm going to find some sort of spacer to put in between this washer and this nut. So I dug around and I found this steel spacer or bushing, you can call it what you will. So it fit on there just right, and now I'm going to put a little bit of anti-seize on this to help keep the threads from galling, and it'll help smooth the force transfer, and it'll help make things go on faster. So we're going to use this long combination wrench. It's 17 millimeter. So I'm just going to start it by hand using the box wrench end so I can have a real good feel on it. And once I feel comfortable, I'm going to switch over to the ratcheting side. And then from here, I'm just going to put it on by feel. But this is what I was mentioning earlier. This is a air gun and the factory bolt. You don't want to do this. I've done this before in the past and messed some things up, and This is just an example bolt I had of something, and the first 3 or 4 threads are really screwed up. That's not really good. You always want to do it by pushing it on with a different tool instead of using the threads in the crank snout. So this piece of all thread and a nut works real well. So here I've pushed it all the way on. It's bottoming out because it got real hard. So I know it's on there now. We're just going to back this nut off and take the all thread out. So I got a new factory bolt, and with these Chrysler engines, they tend to vibrate quite a bit and bolts back out. So I've got this bolt from Mopar, which is the factory parts, and it's got a little bit of blue Loctite on it, which helps prevent it from coming out. And here I'm checking to make sure that the fitment of it. And about around this time when I start putting it on, I realized that the bullet's actually bottoming out, and I'm missing about a 1/4 inch of material somewhere on this balancer, because the original balancer was actually a 1/4 inch thicker in the spot where the retaining bolt is, and this ATI super dampener is actually thinner. So here I'm realizing that right here is that the bolt's bottoming out, and it's not, something isn't right. So I'm backing it out and taking a look and seeing what was going on. This is, like I said, I realized something was wrong. So we're just going to leave the bolt out. We're going to leave the side cover off. We're just going to lift this engine back up and put this cross support back in and wait until we can get some parts, because I did this on a Labor Day, which was Monday, September the 3rd. So not much is really open or anything at all. So I'm going to put this bracket I made below the cross support, so it's really basically a tow hook that I put in. It's seeing some use now and then, but it works. In the front I have 2 long bolts, and I just lost some of the washers here as spacers. I need to do something different about that. And then the 2 back bolts are going to be 14mm heads. There's going to be a long and short one in the back. The short one is the furthest one back. The medium long bolt is the second one to the back, and then these 2 bolts here just side by side in the front. So now that I've got the 2 bolts in here, I'm going to try to get them started by hand. Trying to shift the cross memory to get this started. So I realize the engine's a little too low still, so we're going to push it up and get the holes to line up. Now that I got the 2 front ones started, I'll get the rear 2 started, and I'm just going to give it a couple blips from the impact here. I'm not going to go gung-ho on it. I'm just going to get it snug and then give 2 quick blips, and it should be good. If it falls out, it's my problem and my fault. This is my personal vehicle, so So here we're just gonna put this mount back in on the passenger side. I'm gonna start this through bolt on the frame first, but I feel like I'm a little too high, so I'm going to drop this down and I'm going to get to go in and start this by hand, and then I'll get the other two nuts and bolt that go into the bracket that's on the front side of the engine. So again, I'm just going to get them snug and then give them a couple blips and it should be tight enough. Now I'm just going to lower the engine mount a little bit, or actually I'm going to raise the engine up just a bit. I'm going to check to make sure this bolts in. And it's going to slip on me a little bit, but I felt what I needed to do. So we're just going to take this jack out of here now. We don't need it to support the bottom of the engine. So we're going to put this radiator back in. I'm going to slide this lower radiator hose underneath the thermocoupler for the EGT sensor. Wiring for it, at least. It's a bit of a tight squeeze. You got to make sure that they're in the lower mounts, and we're going to stuff this piece of foam here that I've been using to help direct the airflow through the radiator instead of around it. So here we're checking to make sure that the lower two pegs are in the mounts and shifting it as needed to get it in there. So now we're going to put the two top support brackets in here that hold the radiator in. I've learned to use plastic cups to separate bolts, and so I know where they each go. Helps keep track. You can also use storage bags, like 1 gallon storage bags or sandwich bags, and label them. As long as you keep them in a place where you know you can find them later. So here I'm just going to use a drill on the rattle ratchet function and make sure get them in, and I'll recheck these by hand. Now we're going to put the upper radiator hose back in. I'm going to take the rags I stuffed in each end out first. This just keeps dirt and debris out. So now we're going to take the rags that are in the lower radiator hose out, and again we're going to fit it up and put the clamp on. Lower rags, the rags in the lower radiator hose got a little soggy. A little bit of coolant was dripping out while I was working with the balancer, but that's okay. I had a drip pan under it anyways. So I'm going to use this 1/4 inch drive extension. We're just going to tighten this clamp up and move on. So I'm just going to put the reservoir back in here for now, because I'm going to take this back out and put the belts back on. I left the side cover and the belts off for now. I'm going to use one of my coolant pressure test adapters. And we're going to use a cooling system lift pump. Basically takes compressed air and creates a ported vacuum on one end and sucks all the air out of the cooling system. So here it is, I have it all hooked up. I'm going to use compressed air. It's got 3 valves, one for the air from the compressor, one to create ported vacuum from the compressed air that I just turned on, and it's going to suck all the air out of the cooling system. This takes about 5-10 minutes for it to fully come out. Get it all vacuumed down. Once I get to about 22 to 25 inches of mercury and vacuum, I'll shut the switch off for the compressed air after I've closed the valve to the cooling system. I'll let it sit here for a little bit so I can see if there's any leakage. If there was, the vacuum gauge needle would show less vacuum over a period of time. So while I'm waiting for that, I'm just going to put this wire for the thermocoupler back in the mount that I had it in before. So I have the pan here that I caught all the coolant in. This pan I cleaned out thoroughly before, and this coolant hasn't been in here for that long, so we're just going to reuse it. I'm going to stick one of the hose nozzles in it, and then we're just going to flip the third switch, which is on the back left, or the valve. So we're going to stick this in, and then we're going to turn this valve here. Pressure is going to drop on the gauge, and the coolant's going to get sucked in to the cooling system. And this helps eliminate air pockets too. It'll fill the entire system. Some systems, if they're large enough, you may have to fill it, suck it down again until a little bit of coolant's coming out of the exhaust hose from the compressed air, and then fill it more. So we're just going to fill it here. At a certain point, I will raise this over my shoulder above the fill so that gravity helps suck the coolant in a little bit. As coolant gets sucked in, the suction force gets less and less, so I'm going to have gravity help me here a little bit. And then before I let this down, I'm going to hold it somewhere, and we're going to shut the valve, and then we'll just take this coolant lift pump out of here. And then we'll top off the rest of the coolant as needed. So we'll shut the valve off here, and now we're just going to take this pump off here. So now we're going to take this adapter off. Coolant's going to be probably about an inch and a half below the fill neck here. So we're going to top the rest off here with some clean coolant that I've saved from when I filled it before. And I'm going to bleed some of the bubbles or air out of it. just squeeze the hose a little bit and it'll get air pockets out and suck coolant in. So now I got it topped off, we're just going to put the cap back on and make sure the safety piece is on and down. So now I've washed any coolant residue away, and now we're going to put this tire back on. And again, I'm leaving the fender cover for the timing, or I'm sorry, not timing, the crankshaft balancer in front of part of the engine off, and so I can get to it later when I put the crank bolt back in after I get a spacer. Because again, this was done on September 3rd of 2018, which is Labor Day. So there's really no store open, no hardware store really open. So I'm just gonna put the wheel back on and we're gonna torque it and put it back in the garage until we can get parts. So I'm going to use this torque stick for 100 foot-pounds. We're just going to get these on here snug, and then we're going to lower the vehicle down and use a torque wrench to finish. This is just going to get me close. My compressor is not very strong. So I'm going to set this torque wrench to 100 foot-pounds. Now I've got to find that extension and 19mm socket I had earlier. And now we're gonna put the jack underneath, and I'm gonna put the jack underneath the lower control arm next to where the strut assembly connects to the lower control arm. This way all the weight is on the right components and not somewhere where it shouldn't be. I've found that by lifting it by the lower control arm I can get higher with a cheap jack that I have, so it doesn't lift very high. It only lifts about, I want to say 15 to 18 inches tall. Most jacks that I've used at work lift up to about almost 30, 24, 30 inches instead, so get all the height I can get with this jack that I have at home. So we're just going to torque these lug nuts in a crisscross fashion, and then I'm going to go around in a circle and make sure they're all in, and we'll call it good. So now we're just going to push the old girl in and wait till we can get some parts. Make sure I have the keys. Can't really steer very well if you don't have the keys. Steering wheel locks. It's always nice that it rolls very easily. Some that I've had haven't rolled very well. Other makes and models. It's nice that this one rolls really easily. Now we're going to push her in and call it a day. Make sure you subscribe, hit that like button, make sure you have the notification bell on so you can see when the next videos come up. I'll leave a link in the description below for my Facebook page. You guys can follow me for more up to date instead of waiting for videos every now and then. Have a good day.